They called it a routine auction. Dusty corrals, restless horses, and weathered ranchers. But for Carter McAllister, this day was different. He wasn't just looking for another spirited mare. He was desperate to save his struggling ranch and leave his past heartbreak behind. When he placed the winning bid on a feral, fire-eyed stallion, everyone in the bleachers thought they knew the story. Yet as Carter led the horse away, he discovered a trembling figure hidden in the wagon that came with the sale, a mysterious widow declared missing for months. Nothing would ever be routine again. This was the day everything changed. The small town of Oak Creek, Colorado, was not unlike any other western community, nestled at the foot of rolling hills and towering mountain peaks. The dusty roads snaked through weather-beaten storefronts and old ranch houses, dotted the landscape with their sun-bleached wooden walls. A battered sign welcomed every traveler, Oak Creek, where dreams run wild. That motto felt half true. At best, people here often saw their hopes mingle with back-breaking realities of ranch life. Life in Oak Creek was both warm and tough. Neighbors helped each other in times of need, but the harsh environment demanded resilience. Carter McAllister lived on the outskirts of Oak Creek. A tall, broad-shouldered man, Carter was in his late 30s. His ranch, called High Haven Range, wasn't the biggest around, but it had belonged to his family for 3 generations. The loss of his father 2 years prior left Carter as the sole heir to a legacy that felt both precious and suffocating. High Haven Range had once thrived herds of healthy cattle horse stables filled with lean mustangs, fields of tall grass, shimmering in the summer breeze. But the ranch had fallen on hard times. Debts were stacking up like firewood. The fencing needed repairs Carter couldn't afford, and each day carried new concerns. Still, Carter pressed on, determined to salvage his family's name and the land he loved so deeply. He woke before dawn like every other rancher for miles. He would feed his cattle check on a pregnant mare named Chestnut Beauty and dream about finding something, anything that might pull him out of debt. An auction was on the horizon, the Oak Creek Fall Livestock Auction, where you could buy or sell horses, mules, or even old ranch wagons. Carter didn't usually purchase horses at auctions. He preferred breeding his own. But times changed. He needed new stock to bolster his offerings to local cattle drivers and equestrian enthusiasts alike. And perhaps if fortune smiled, he'd discover that one horse who'd become a champion on the local rodeo circuit, bringing in prize money that could keep High Haven afloat. So with a glimmer of desperation in his heart, Carter planned his trip to the Oak Creek auction house. He recalled an article he'd read that very morning. Debbie Jensen, a renowned horse trainer from Redwood Pastures in Cody, Wyoming, was bringing a handful of well-bred mustangs to the sale. People whispered about Debbie's horses. They were rumored to be the descendants of a prized lineage favored by old-time rodeo legends. Carter didn't have the funds to gamble on an overpriced horse, but it never hurt to look. The day before the auction, Carter spent his evening in the stables, brushing down Chestnut Beauty. Her flank twitched in response to his gentle strokes. "You're going to be a mama soon," he said softly, trying to calm his nerves. Losing his prized mare would be catastrophic, but so would not buying the right horse at tomorrow's auction. Sometimes in the ranching world, you had to risk it all just to survive. Outside, the orange sky faded into a deep purple. Clouds traced the horizon. The hush of the evening settled over the ranch like a blanket. Carter's friend Cole Ramirez rode up on his trusty Palomino to check in on him. "You all set for tomorrow?" he asked. Carter sighed, his eyes still on his mare. "As set as I'll ever be. Money's tight, but I need something to boost my stable." Cole nodded in understanding. "Be careful, Carter. When desperation runs high, people make wild bets. Don't get swindled by smooth-talking auctioneers. I'll keep my head." Carter assured him, though a knot of worry twisted in his stomach. Late that night, Carter found sleep elusive. His father's old ranch ledger lay open on the kitchen table. Inside were entries dating back decades, sales purchases, expansions. It was more than a ledger, it was his family's entire legacy. He traced his calloused fingertip over the lines, imagining how he could add his own triumphant chapter to those pages. If only tomorrow's auction would grant him a spark of hope. Auction day arrived under a crisp, clear morning sky. Carter hitched his trailer and drove his weather-beaten pickup toward the Oak Creek auction house. Pickups from all over the region jammed the dusty parking lot. Horses stomped and whinnied in their pens, their breath steaming in the chilly air. Ranchers, traders, and curious onlookers crowded around the fenced enclosures, eyeing the livestock and striking deals before the bidding even began. A swirl of excitement and tension crackled through the crowd. The smell of hay manure and leather harnesses made Carter's heart twinge with nostalgia. He recalled coming here as a boy with his dad, marveling at the broncs that snorted and kicked behind the gates. Now the business end of things loomed. He'd have to be quick and sure in his decisions. He passed through the stables where the bigger, more expensive horses were showcased. Debbie Jensen was there, talking to a prospective buyer about her famous redwood Mustangs. Carter stopped briefly to watch her demonstrate one horse's gentle temperament. It reared up only slightly, then settled under her calming hand. Debbie's name alone carried weight, but Carter couldn't afford her Mustangs. Everyone knew they went for double or triple the usual price. She caught Carter's gaze, offered a small, polite smile, then returned her attention to the potential buyer. Carter sighed and moved on. Further along, he wandered into the less polished section, where older wagons and problem horses were sold, animals that came with disclaimers like, "not for beginners" or "unbroken." Sometimes a diamond in the rough appeared among these troubled beasts. More often they were heartbreakers, injured, ill-tempered, or simply untrainable. Yet Carter's father had once discovered a champion barrel racer in this very corner of the auction yard. Drawn by a loud commotion, Carter followed the sound of furious neighing. A group of men wrestled with a large, dark bay stallion. Lather foamed around the horse's mouth, and its eyes flared wide in terror or rage. Carter couldn't decide which. The stallion stomped, reared, and thrashed, sending onlookers scurrying. A short, wiry man with a straw hat stepped in front of the horse, a frayed lead rope clenched in his fists. "Folks, I'll level with you. This horse is wild as they come." Found him running with a Mustang herd near the canyon. Thought we could gentle him, but no dice. He's strong, good lines, but no brand and no papers to speak of. We're including this old wagon with him because we can't even get him to pull it. Buy one, take the other. We just need him off our hands. Carter's heart pounded as he studied the stallion. The horse's coat gleamed even under layers of dust. There was raw, untapped power in its muscles and a fierce intelligence burning in its eyes. Something about the stallion reminded Carter of his own struggles, a spirit cornered, forced to fight or succumb. Bidding began, and Carter positioned himself near the edge, arms folded. The first few bids were half-hearted. No one wanted the headache of taming this beast. Carter watched as the stallion turned and slammed its hooves into the wooden side of the pen, leaving a deep crack in the plank. Another wave of nervous chatter rippled through the crowd, and a few bidders drifted away. The wiry auctioneer tried to rally interest. "Come on now, folks. This is a strong horse, sure-footed. He's perfect if you've got the skill to train him. And the wagon, it's an antique, Some say it's from the late 1800s. Restorable, or at least good for parts. Who'll give me 500? Silence. Then a murmur. Carter's stomach twisted. He needed a horse with potential. But was this too big a gamble? Then he thought of his father's ledger, and how success sometimes required bold chances. Reluctantly, he raised his hand. "I'll bid 500, he called. A few heads turned. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. "We have 500. Do I hear 6? Another man in the back offered 6. Carter mentally calculated his limit. He wasn't about to blow his entire budget on a horse no one wanted. But an inexplicable pull tugged at him. 7, he said firmly. His competitor raised again to 800. Carter clenched his teeth, the tension building. Finally, after a flurry of back and forth, the other bidder shrugged and walked away. "Sold. To the gentleman in the brown hat for $1,000, the auctioneer exclaimed, lowering his gavel. The crowd parted, some shaking their heads in disbelief at Carter's purchase. Others patted him on the back, impressed by his boldness or uncertain how to respond. Carter exhaled. $1,000 was more than he'd planned to spend, but there was something about that stallion. High Haven Range needed a spark of new energy, a symbol of rebirth. Maybe this horse was the one to carry them forward, or maybe it would be the final nail in the rancher's coffin. The men wrestled the horse into Carter's trailer. The wagon that came as part of the deal was a rickety, paint-chipped relic. One wheel looked dangerously loose, and the seat was missing. Carter raised an eyebrow, though the men insisted. "It's stable enough for now." Sighing, Carter led the stallion in carefully, but the horse refused to move. Eyes wide with terror, it jerked away from the trailer's interior. After a tense struggle, they managed to coax it inside and shut the gate. The old wagon was hitched precariously to the trailer's side. Carter felt his nerves fray. He offered quick thanks to the men, then hopped into his truck, hoping to get home before the stallion kicked down the trailer door. As he drove away from the auction yard, dust clouding his rear-view mirror, he prayed he hadn't just made the worst mistake of his life. Carter's muscles tensed the entire ride home. The stallion thrashed inside the trailer, causing the rig to sway on every curve. By the time Carter turned onto the dirt road leading to High Haven Range, his shirt clung to him with sweat, and his nerves were shot. He pulled up to the stable area, parking near an empty corral. The sky had begun turning orange again. Day fading into dusk. Cole Ramirez appeared, offering to help unload the new acquisition. "You actually bought that crazy stallion?" Cole asked, incredulous. "Heard talk all around the yard about your big gamble." "Yeah," Carter said, climbing out of his truck. I couldn't shake the feeling he was worth saving. Cole let out a low whistle. "Well, let's see what we're dealing with." They unlatched the trailer ramp. The stallion tossed its head, nostrils flaring, as if daring either man to come any closer. With slow, deliberate steps, Carter approached the horse and murmured soft words of reassurance. Nonsense, really. But the gentler his tone, the less likely the stallion was to bolt. Cole stood by rope at the ready. Eventually, Carter secured the lead and guided the stallion out. The horse sidestepped, nearly smashing Cole against the trailer's metal edge. But after a tense minute, they led it into the corral, latched the gate, and stepped back. The stallion circled the corral, eyes rolling with suspicion. "That'll do for now," Carter said, leaning against the gate, trying to calm his pounding heart. He gestured to the battered wagon. "Now for that old eyesore." Cole lifted an eyebrow. You really wanted that thing? It came with the horse. No extra charge. Let's figure out how to unhitch it. The two men moved around the side of the trailer. The wagon was draped with a moldy tarp, the color so sun-faded it was hard to guess the original shade. One wheel wobbled precariously. Might be easier to yank it off and drag it out, Cole suggested. Carter nodded. He grabbed a crowbar from his truck, intending to pry loose the old wooden boards that held the wagon in place. With a grunt, he tugged at the tarp and froze. A dull thump sounded from inside the wagon. Cole and Carter exchanged startled glances. "You hear that?" Cole whispered. Carter nodded, heart pounding again. "Yeah." Cautiously, Carter gripped the edge of the tarp, pulling it back further. Another thump, then a soft moan, like someone was in pain or fear. Carter's blood turned to ice. "Who's there?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. Silence. Then a shifting of shadows beneath the tarp. A pale hand emerged, trembling. Carter dropped the crowbar and rushed forward. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently. "We're not going to hurt you." He lifted the tarp, fully revealing a makeshift bedding of straw and tattered blankets. Huddled among the blankets was a woman, her hair a messy tangle, her face gaunt and dirty. Her clothes were rumpled, as though she had slept in them for days. She cowered away from the sudden light, as if expecting harm. Cole stared, eyes wide. What in tarnation? The woman's eyes flicked from Carter to Cole, confusion and terror swirling in her gaze. "Please, don't," she rasped, barely above a whisper. Carter realized she was in rough shape, exhausted, undernourished, likely dehydrated. Without hesitation, he offered a hand. "Ma'am, you're safe. We had no idea anyone was in here. Let us help you." She tried to speak, but only a hoarse croak came out. Carter helped her down, supporting her weight. Her knees nearly buckled beneath her. "Cole, get some water," he ordered. Cole nodded, running off. Gently, Carter guided the woman to a bench near the corral. The stallion, sensing commotion, whinnied and stomped, but Carter ignored it. All his attention focused on the stranger, her gaunt, terrified eyes, her trembling hands that clutched at his shirt for balance. "Take it easy," Carter said, tilting the water bottle Cole brought to her cracked lips. She sipped greedily, then coughed. Up close, Carter noticed faint bruises on her arms, as though she'd been handled roughly. How did you end up in that wagon?" Her voice barely audible. She answered, I had to hide." She coughed again, wincing at some pain in her side. "They were after me." Carter exchanged another look with Cole, whose expression matched his own swirling mixture of concern and disbelief. "Who's after you, ma'am?" She swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't say," she muttered. "Not yet." Then her eyes rolled back and she fainted into Carter's arms. Alarmed, Carter scooped her up. "We need to get her inside. Call Doc Pearson. She needs medical attention." Cole nodded. "I'll call him," he said, sprinting for the ranch house. Carter cradled the woman against his chest, striding toward his home. Hundreds of questions clamored in his mind. Who was she? Why was she hiding? Did the men who sold him the horse know about her? And what had she meant by, "They're after me"? As Carter carried her through his front door, he felt her shiver. Her face was ghostly pale, her breathing shallow. He tried to soothe her. "Hang on. You're gonna be okay." In the silent house, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock, Carter laid her gently on the sofa. He brushed a lock of hair off her forehead. For a moment her eyelids fluttered open, and she looked up at him with an expression of mingled fear and relief. "I'm Carter," he said softly. "You're safe here." She murmured something he couldn't catch, then slipped back into unconsciousness. Outside, the stallion's frantic neighing echoed in the deepening twilight. An hour later, Doc Pearson arrived, a tall, wiry man with a grey moustache, his black bag of medical supplies in hand. He wore a perpetual look of worry, though that evening his concern was warranted. Carter explained what happened as the doctor examined the mysterious woman, checking her pulse temperature and the bruises on her arms. Cole lingered by the door. "We should contact the sheriff," he mumbled, shooting Carter a sidelong glance. "Not yet," Carter replied. "Let's see what she says when she wakes up. She might be in trouble." Part of him suspected a legal issue, but another part, a protective instinct, cautioned him to wait until he heard her story. Doc Pearson's diagnosis was tentative. She's malnourished, dehydrated, and stressed to the bone. She also has a nasty bruise on her ribs, could be a fracture. Needs rest fluids, proper meals. Once she's stable, we can figure out the rest. Carter thanked the doctor, who packed up his bag and quietly slipped out into the night. Cole followed him to see him off, leaving Carter alone with the unconscious woman. He fetched a spare blanket and draped it over her. Storm clouds pressed against the night sky, hinting at rain. In that hush, Carter's gaze kept drifting from the sofa to the darkened window where the stallion's silhouette pranced in the distance. Morning light found the woman stirring awake. Carter, dozing in a nearby chair, rubbed the sleep from his eyes as her lids fluttered open. She immediately tensed eyes, flicking around the unfamiliar room. "It's all right," Carter said gently, leaning forward. "You're at my Ranch High Haven range. I'm Carter McAllister." He offered a soft smile, hoping to reassure her. "The doctor said you need rest." She tried to speak throat-catching. Carter handed her a glass of water, which she sipped carefully. How long?" she asked. "You've been here overnight?" "It's about 6 in the morning now," Carter replied, observing her face. Dark shadows ringed her eyes. Her cheekbones jutted sharply. She looked older than she likely was, the lines of worry etched into her features. Even so, there was a certain delicate beauty under the grime and exhaustion. With shaky fingers, she ran a hand through her tangled hair. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go. They dragged me around, forced me into that wagon when they caught wind I was escaping." Her lips trembled. "If you want me gone, I'll go." "You're not going anywhere," Carter said firmly. "At least, not until you're better." "Who did this to you?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "My name is Ava. Ava Colburn. I'm a widow. My husband died last year." She paused, collecting herself. "He had debts. Serious debts to some dangerous men who demanded I pay up. But I didn't have the money. When I sold off what little remained of our possessions and still couldn't pay, they threatened me." She swallowed, voice shaking. "I tried to run, but they tracked me. Said they'd do worse if I didn't have the cash." Carter listened intently, a heaviness settling in his chest. "Were they the same men who sold the horse and wagon at the auction?" Ava nodded. "Not them directly. They must have hired or coerced them. I overheard talk of using me as leverage. They were going to transport me somewhere. I hid in the wagon during a rest stop, hoping to escape under the tarp. The next thing I knew, we were at the auction. I stayed quiet, terrified. And then you bought it all. You saved me without even knowing." She offered a faint, trembling smile. Carter rubbed a hand over his jaw, anger simmering in his gut. The notion that criminals were trafficking a vulnerable widow around in secret compartments made his blood boil. "You said you're a widow. Did the local authorities know about the threats?" Ava's gaze dropped to her lap, tears threatening again. "I told the police back in Montrose, but the men behind these debts are powerful. My husband Henry took out loans from unscrupulous sources. The sheriff tried to help, but the law can be slow. Then they started following me, cornering me when I was alone. I panicked, and I ran." She swallowed. "I tried to hide in Oak Creek, but they caught me again." Carter recalled hearing rumors in Oak Creek about a missing widow named Ava Colburn, but it hadn't seemed more than small-town gossip. Some folks said she fled to avoid paying her own debts. Others hinted at darker reasons. "So, you've been missing for months?" Ava nodded. "Yes, I've been living off scraps, hiding wherever I could." She pressed her hands over her face, as if ashamed. "I'm sorry to bring this to your doorstep. I don't want to endanger you. But I had no choice." Carter's mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. He wanted to help her, but the involvement of criminals was a serious risk. High Haven Range was already under financial pressure. The last thing he needed was trouble with a violent gang. But he couldn't turn his back on someone that's so desperate, especially after discovering her in that state. He gently touched her shoulder. "You can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure something out." Ava's eyes filled again with tears. This time, tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise I'll work, earn my keep. I can cook clean whatever you need." Carter offered a soft smile. "Right now, just focus on getting better." A soft knock on the door turned their heads. Cole stepped inside, wearing an uneasy expression. "Morning." Carter got a minute. Outside. Carter patted Ava's hand reassuringly. "I'll be right back." He followed Cole out onto the porch, leaving Ava to rest. Outside, the early sunlight bathed the ranch. The new stallion dozed in the corral, as though exhausted from its travels. Cole crossed his arms. "I just spoke with Debbie Jensen over the phone. She heard you bought a wild stallion, asked if you might want training help. Told her, maybe. Then she mentioned something else. Rumor is the sheriff in Montrose is searching for a missing widow named Ava Colburn." He paused. "And you say she's in your house?" Carter blew out a breath. "She's in trouble, Cole. She says her husband's debt got her tangled with some dangerous people. They forced her into that wagon." Cole shook his head. "This is bigger than us, Carter. We can't hide her forever. The sheriff's bound to come knocking." I know, Carter said, frustration creeping into his voice. "But she's terrified. And those men might come here." A protective surge rose in Carter's chest. "I won't hand her over to criminals, and I won't toss her out. Not while she's injured and alone." Cole gave a small nod of understanding. "All right, I'm with you. Just be careful. Oak Creek's not immune to trouble." He glanced at the corral. "Any regrets about that stallion?" Carter looked at the dark bay standing tall beneath the rising sun. "No," he said with conviction. "Strangely enough, I think he might be our good luck charm. He brought Ava here after all." Cole managed a crooked grin, though worry still etched his features. "Well, you always did have a soft spot for strays." Carter's gaze shifted to the horizon where the mountains towered. "Yeah," he whispered, "and maybe one day all these strays will find a safe home." Over the next few days, Ava's health improved under Carter's care. She stayed in the ranch house's small guest room, sleeping on crisp cotton sheets and eating hearty meals. At first she flinched at every noise, as if expecting her pursuers to barge in. Gradually she began to relax, though shadows of anxiety lingered behind her eyes. True to her promise, Ava insisted on helping around the ranch once she regained some strength. She washed dishes, swept floors, and tidied up the place with a quiet efficiency. She even ventured outside to feed the chickens and gather eggs, wearing one of Carter's spare jackets over her threadbare clothes. One morning, she found Carter in the stable, crouched beside the wild stallion. The horse, still unnamed, had allowed Carter close enough to check for injuries, though it remained skittish. Ava gently approached, stopping a few paces away. The stallion jerked its head up, ears flattening. "Easy," Carter murmured, placing a calming hand on the horse's neck. He glanced over his shoulder at Ava. "He's still not used to anyone but me." Ava nodded, her expression softening as she observed the beautiful creature. "He looks lonely." Carter's brow furrowed. "Yeah, maybe he is. Once he's gentled, maybe we can let him roam with the other horses." He sighed. "But training him properly, that could take time." They fell into a companionable silence, the only sound the stallion's soft snorting. Ava ventured closer, extending a hand. The stallion snorted again, but didn't bolt. Carter noticed how her presence seemed oddly soothing. After a few moments, Ava lightly touched the stallion's muzzle. A fragile trust shimmered between them. Carter's voice was gentle. "You're good with animals?" Ava smiled faintly, but the sadness in her eyes never fully left. "My husband used to say the same thing." They both froze at the mention of her late husband. Carter cleared his throat. "I'm sorry about Henry." She nodded, drawing in a shaky breath. "Thank you." A tension enveloped them, an unspoken acknowledgement that they were treading on personal ground. Carter wanted to comfort her, but he knew that her grief and fear were complex. So he simply stayed close, letting the quiet moment linger. Finally, Ava slipped away, leaving Carter to wonder what demons still haunted her. In Oak Creek, tongues wagged. People noticed Carter's unusual purchase, a wild, unbranded stallion, and how Carter hadn't visited the saloon or attended church since. Word spread that he was holed up on his ranch with a secret. Speculation ran rampant. Some folks said Carter was training a champion. Others suggested he was harboring stolen goods. At the local diner, Becky Wright, known for her unstoppable gossip, claimed she'd seen a mysterious woman sneaking around Carter's ranch at dawn. Sheriff Donovan Hayes, a middle-aged lawman with a stern jawline, caught wind of these rumors. Hayes had known Carter's family for decades, respected them as honest ranchers. But after receiving a query from the Montrose Sheriff's Office about a missing widow, Hayes decided it was time to pay Carter a visit. A few days after Ava's arrival, Carter was mending fence posts near the front gate when the sheriff's patrol car rumbled up the dusty drive. Hayes stepped out, tipping his hat. "Morning, Carter." Carter removed his gloves, exhaling. "Sheriff Hayes, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Hayes walked closer, scanning the ranch house and the outbuildings with a practiced eye. "Just doing my rounds. Mind if I come in?" Carter's chest tightened. He forced a polite nod. "Sure, Sheriff. Grab some iced tea if you want." They walked together into the house. Ava, hearing voices, hurried to the kitchen. One look at Hayes's uniform sent her into a near panic. She ducked around a corner unseen by the sheriff. Carter offered a quick glance of reassurance before guiding Hayes to the living room. Hayes settled in an armchair, nodding at the tidy space. "You keeping busy, Carter?" Carter tried to sound casual. "Ranch work never ends. Just bought a wild stallion at the auction." "So I heard." Hayes gave him a pointed look. "Folks say you haven't been around much. Some claim you have company." Carter's heart pounded. "You know how rumors get started. Ranchers get busy, that's all." Hayes studied Carter's face for a long moment. "The Montrose Sheriff's Office asked me to keep an eye out for a missing woman named Ava Colburn. She's a widow who disappeared under suspicious circumstances. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Carter inhaled slowly. "Ava Colburn." You say he repeated, feigning ignorance. Inside, guilt churned. He had always been honest with Hayes, but one glance at Ava's terrified eyes in the kitchen corner told him she was still in danger. "Can't say I do. Haven't heard that name." Hayes leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Carter, I've known you since you were a boy. If you're in trouble, or if you're harboring someone, it's best to come clean, now. I don't want you mixed up in something criminal." Carter kept his features neutral. "I appreciate that, Sheriff, but it's just me here. Well, me and a very temperamental stallion." Hayes let the silence stretch, searching for cracks in Carter's composure. Finally, he stood up, smoothing the brim of his hat. "All right, Carter. If you see or hear anything about Ava Colburn, let me know. There are dangerous folk out there. She might be safer in custody than on the run." Carter forced a tight smile. "I'll keep that in mind, Sheriff." He walked Hayes back to his car. The sheriff paused, glancing around one last time. Then he nodded, got in, and drove off, leaving a swirl of dust in his wake. Inside the house, Ava emerged, pale and trembling. Carter placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He's gone." Her voice shook. "Thank you. I know it's a lot to ask to lie to the sheriff." Carter sighed. "I don't like lying. But after hearing what you've been through, I can't risk them throwing you into a holding cell until they sort it out. Those men might find you first." He stepped closer, searching her face. "But we can't keep this secret forever, Ava." She nodded, tears brimming again. "I know. I just need time to figure out how to handle those debts, or how to prove that they're forcing me into this." "I'm so sorry." Carter gently squeezed her shoulder. "We'll figure it out together." But as he spoke, he couldn't ignore the weight in his chest. The lines on his father's ranch ledger were already stained with red ink. Now he was entangled in a dangerous web, risking not only his ranch but possibly his life for a woman he hardly knew. Yet each time he looked into Ava's desperate eyes, he knew he couldn't turn away. That evening, a restless wind blew across the ranch, rattling the old shutters. Ava tried to settle into bed, but nightmares of her pursuers tormented her. Carter, sensing her distress, brewed a pot of chamomile tea, offering it to her in the dimly lit kitchen. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the warm mug in both hands. "It's been a long time since someone was kind to me without wanting something in return." Carter shrugged lightly, leaning against the countertop. "Kindness doesn't cost a thing," he said. But the burden on his shoulders told him otherwise. Kindness here might cost him everything. He watched her stare into the steaming tea her eyes distant-haunted. "You don't have to tell me any more than you want," he said gently. "But if you need someone to listen, I'm here." After a long moment, she spoke, voice brittle. "My husband Henry was a dreamer. He invested in schemes, borrowed money to expand our farm. When the drought hit, everything fell apart. We lost the farm. He sank into depression, and then he took his own life. The creditors didn't care that I was left with nothing. They only cared about collecting the debt." Her eyes glistened. "I tried to pay them off little by little, but I was drowning. Then these men showed up. At first, they seemed like normal debt collectors, but they became more threatening. When they started implying they could sell me, traffic me, I ran. That's when the sheriff labeled me missing." The truth of her ordeal settled in Carter's chest like a stone. He couldn't imagine the horror. "I won't let them hurt you," he said, meaning every word. Ava nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I believe you." Just then, lightning flashed outside the window. A low rumble of thunder followed, and the skies unleashed a sudden torrent of rain. Carter set down his mug. "I should check on the horses, make sure the stable's secure." Without hesitation, Ava grabbed her coat. "I'll come with you." Together they braved the downpour dashing across the muddy yard. Rain soaked their hair and clothes. The stable was dimly lit by a single lantern, the wind whistling through gaps in the old boards. Carter found the stallion pacing anxiously in its stall eyes, rolling at the thunder's roar. "Hey, easy fella," Carter said, placing a reassuring hand on the horse's flank. He grabbed a blanket and draped it over the stallion to keep him warm. Ava hovered close, her hair plastered to her neck, shivering. A loud clang startled them both. A metal gate in the corral had swung open, banging against a post. "It's just the wind," Carter said. But Ava's hand gripped his arm, her eyes darting around the flickering shadows. "Sorry," she murmured. "I'm jumpy." Carter softly squeezed her hand. "I understand. Let's just finish up here and get back inside." They worked quickly to secure the stable check, the feed, and quiet the animals. The storm raged, and at one point, lightning illuminated a tall figure near the fence line. Carter's heart lurched. Someone was out there. He blinked against the brightness, trying to see through the sheets of rain, but the figure vanished. Did you see that Ava whispered fear, creeping back into her voice? Carter nodded, every sense on high alert. He reached for a pitchfork, the only weapon at hand. "Stay behind me," he said. They moved to the stable door, peering outside. Another flash of lightning revealed no one in sight. Could the storm have played tricks on his eyes? Carter decided not to risk it. "We should get inside. Now!" They dashed back to the ranch house, locking the door behind them. Breathless, drenched, they traded tense glances. If that had indeed been a person near the fence, it could be a neighbor checking on something, or it could be Ava's pursuers closing in. Time ticked by the storm, thrashing outside like an angry beast. Carter paced by the window, watching for any movement. At last, the rain began to ease. No sign of intruders. Finally, Carter exhaled tension draining from his muscles. "Maybe it was just my imagination," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Ava sat on the sofa, arms wrapped around her knees. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. They're after me, not you." Carter moved to sit beside her. "It's not your fault. They're the criminals, not you." He gave her a reassuring nod. "Besides, I can handle myself. High Haven Range might be old, but it's home. I know how to protect it." Ava looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and worry. "I don't want you to put yourself in harm's way." He offered a gentle smile. "I already have, and I'll keep doing it." He hesitated, noticing how close they were on the sofa. A flicker of warmth passed between them, an unspoken connection forged by fear and shared vulnerability. But Carter quickly stood, clearing his throat. "Let's try to get some sleep," he said softly. "We'll figure things out in the morning." Ava nodded, standing as well. For a moment they locked gazes in the dim lamplight, each of them aware of how this strange situation had bound their lives together. Then, without another word, they parted for their separate rooms. Long after Ava's footsteps faded down the hallway, Carter lay in bed, listening to the rain drip from the eaves. Images of the figure outside danced in his mind, refusing to let him rest. The phrase, "They're after me," echoed over and over, becoming, "They're after us." He suddenly realized this problem was no longer only Ava's. He was part of it now. Over the following week, Carter doubled his security measures around the ranch. He installed heavier locks on the doors, set up motion sensor lights around the barn, and made sure every gate was securely latched. Cole visited more frequently, helping Carter keep an eye on the place. They even rigged a makeshift alarm system with tin cans and string primitive, but it might warn them of nighttime intruders. Ava tried to contribute however she could. While Carter and Cole fortified the ranch, she cooked meals, laundered clothes, and tidied up. Each day her color improved, and she walked with more confidence. Sometimes Carter caught her gazing at the distant mountains with a thoughtful expression, maybe longing for a freedom she feared she'd never fully regain. News traveled fast in small towns. Sheriff Hayes returned, making polite inquiries, but never catching Ava in person. Carter stuck to his story that he was alone. The more Hayes pressed, the more Carter feared an outright search of the property. But Hayes didn't have a warrant yet. For now, Carter held him at bay. Meanwhile, word reached Montrose that Ava Colburn might be hiding out near Oak Creek. The criminals who hunted her had their own informants. A menacing man named Rourke, rumored to be the enforcer for the loan sharks, arrived in Oak Creek with a handful of intimidating thugs. They checked the local motel, scoured the back roads, and questioned bar patrons. An uneasy undercurrent seeped into the peaceful town. One afternoon, as Carter rode his old quarter-horse Daisy to check fencing along the perimeter, he noticed fresh tire tracks near the entrance to an abandoned cabin on the property. The cabin had belonged to his grandfather, but was long since boarded up. Carter dismounted, his pulse quickening as he followed the tire tracks around the side. There, in the soft dirt, were footprints, multiple sets. Carter's mind raced. Had Rourke's men trespassed here, searching for Ava? He felt the prickling sensation of being watched. Slowly he turned, scanning the pine trees. A branch snapped. Daisy snorted nervously. Carter's gut told him to leave before he got pinned down. Mounting quickly, he cantered back to the ranch, eyes darting, half expecting to see headlights roaring after him. But the woods remained still. Back at High Haven, Carter found Ava tending to the stallion, who was becoming more tolerant of her gentle presence. "Ava," he said quietly, taking her aside, "I think those men are on my land. I found tracks near the old cabin." She turned pale. "Oh, God. I can leave. I don't want them to hurt you or your ranch." Carter shook his head. "I'm not letting them chase you off. This is my property, and I won't stand for hired thugs roaming around. But we need a plan, Ava." That evening, Carter, Ava, and Cole gathered in the ranch house kitchen. Storm lanterns cast warm light on the worn wooden table. They hunched over a crudely drawn map of the ranch, marking potential entry points. Cole pointed to a spot near the south boundary. "We can keep watch here. If they come from the main road, we'll see 'em. But if they cut through the woods to the north, that's trickier." Carter frowned, tapping the map. "The old cabin is in that area. They might try using it as a hideout." He shot a glance at Ava. "We could try to lure them out, catch them in the act. Then we can hand them over to Sheriff Hayes with proof they're trespassing or harassing us." Ava's hands shook slightly. "They might be armed. These men are dangerous, Carter." "I know," he said grimly, "but so am I when my home's threatened." Cole nodded, albeit nervously. "We'll need weapons. I've got a rifle at my place I can bring over." Carter glanced at Ava. "If we can gather enough evidence that they're harassing you, maybe the sheriff will realize you're the victim, not a fugitive. That could be our best shot at clearing your name." Ava tried to steady herself. "I'm willing to try. I just hate the idea of you two putting yourselves in danger for me." Cole gave her a reassuring smile. "Sometimes we do risky things to protect a friend." A flicker of gratitude shone in her eyes. She clasped her hands together. "Let's do it." Their plan was set. Carter and Cole would monitor the perimeter at night. If Rourke's men showed up, they'd confront them hopefully with a camera in hand to record any threats or illegal activity. Cole would call the sheriff once they had enough evidence. Ava would stay safely inside. Her involvement would only come into play if they needed a witness. It was risky, but it felt better than waiting for an ambush. 3 nights passed quietly, but tension coiled in the air like a snake ready to strike. On the 4th, clouds smothered the moon and stars, leaving the ranch in near total darkness. Carter and Cole took their posts near the barn, rifles, loaded flashlights ready. Inside the house, Ava watched from the window, heart thudding. Around midnight, Carter heard an engine hum. Headlights flickered briefly at the end of the drive, then cut off. Shadows moved near the fence. 3 men, maybe more, slipping silently across the property line. Carter tensed, signaling Cole. They crept toward the tractor, staying low. One voice, a gravelly rasp, carried through the wind. "Fan out." "She's here somewhere. Keep it quiet." Carter's gut clenched. That had to be Rourke. He clicked on his flashlight. "That's far enough," he barked. Cole raised his rifle. The intruders froze, caught in the beam. "You don't belong here," Carter said coldly. "Leave. Now." Rourke stepped forward. "She owes a debt. We're just here to collect." "Then go to court." Carter growled. "This is trespassing. Get off my land." Rourke laughed. "You think I care about court?" Cole's phone was recording. "We've got everything on video," he warned. But Rourke didn't back off. One of his men lunged. Cole fired a warning shot into the air. The thug halted, arms raised, but the standoff was spiraling fast. Suddenly, Rourke rushed Cole, knocking his phone to the dirt. They wrestled, limbs tangled. Carter fought off a second man, grappling in the dark. A shot rang out, missing wide and clanging off the barn's roof. Then Rourke drew a handgun, jamming it into Cole's chest. Carter froze. "Don't do it," he said, voice tight. Just then, Ava's voice rang out. "Stop." She stood in the open, holding a lantern. "If you're after me here, I am." "Leave them alone." Rourke turned, grinning. "Brave. Step forward." As she moved, Carter dropped his rifle under Rourke's watchful eye. The standoff tipped in Rourke's favor until a sudden furious neigh sliced through the night. The wild stallion, loose from its stall, charged. Eyes wide, ears pinned, it thundered straight at the intruders. In the chaos, Cole elbowed Rourke hard, knocking his gun loose. Carter dove for his weapon. Rourke scrambled for his handgun, but Carter aimed his rifle squarely. "Try it." The stallion reared up, flailing its hooves. One thug went down hard. Cole grabbed his phone. Ava stood motionless, the stallion shielding her. Sirens cut through the night. Sheriff Hayes's cruiser roared onto the property, followed by a second unit. Deputies flooded the yard. "Hands in the air," Hayes shouted. Rourke and his men had no choice but to surrender. As cuffs snapped closed, Carter and Cole leaned against the barn, breathless. Ava stood beside the stallion, eyes locked on Carter. Hayes approached, eyes wide. "Ava Colburn." "Yes, Sheriff," she said softly. "They tried to abduct me." "We have footage." Cole handed over the phone. Hayes reviewed the clip. His expression hardened. "Rourke, you're under arrest for assault and kidnapping. Deputies haul the rest in." Rourke spat. "You'll regret this." But the law had caught up with him at last. Hayes turned to Ava. "We'll need your statement, but it looks like you've been the victim all along." Relieved, Ava nodded. "Thank you." Carter exhaled. The first streaks of dawn brushed the sky. The stallion stood quietly beside Ava, its presence still fierce, still loyal. They had survived the night, and maybe, just maybe, they had turned the tide. The legal storm that followed was swift. Ava gave her full testimony to Sheriff Hayes, detailing everything: the threats, the forced captivity the night of the showdown. Cole's video sealed the case. Rourke and his men were charged with multiple crimes, and the Montrose loan shark ring began to unravel. At last, Ava's name was cleared. She wasn't a fugitive, just a widow who'd been running for her life. Carter stood beside her through it all, offering quiet strength. He drove her to hearings, waited outside courtrooms, and brought her tea when she couldn't sleep. The ranch still had bills, still demanded his every muscle and breath. But for the first time in years, Carter didn't feel alone in the fight. Back home, life slowly returned to routine. Thunder, the once unbreakable stallion, softened under Ava's hand. She named him for the night he charged to her defense, and together, she and Carter trained him with patience. He wasn't tame, not yet, but he was healing just like them. Ava worked tirelessly on the ranch. She mucked stalls, fed animals, and patched fences. Her touch was gentle, yet every action carried grit. In the evenings, she'd hum softly in the kitchen, while Carter listened from the porch, wondering how a stranger had come to mean so much. One autumn afternoon, they rode side by side across golden fields. They paused atop a ridge overlooking High Haven Range. Cattle grazed in the distance. The barn had fresh paint. The land was still humble, but alive. "I don't know how to thank you," Carter said, glancing at her. Ava smiled. "You already did. You gave me a second chance." He took a breath. "Before you showed up, I was hanging on by a thread. This ranch, my life, it all felt like it was slipping away. But you brought something back." Her eyes shimmered. "So did you, Carter. I thought I'd never feel safe again. Never trust again." They sat in silence, the breeze tugging at Ava's hair. Carter reached for her hand. "Stay, for good." Ava nodded slowly, tears brimming. "I'd like that." Their kiss was soft, full of promises unspoken. In that moment, the past no longer haunted them. Only the future stretched widow and warm. In the weeks that followed, Ava became part of the ranch's soul. Debbie Jensen stopped by to praise Thunder's progress. Even the bank, impressed by Carter's renewed focus, agreed to restructure his debts. On the porch one chilly morning, Carter wrapped an arm around Ava as they watched Thunder gallop through the pasture. The stallion tossed his mane free and fearless. Carter kissed the top of Ava's head. Funny how a wild horse and a broken wagon brought all this. She smiled. Sometimes the most unexpected things carry the greatest blessings. Together they watched the horizon, knowing whatever came next, they'd face it, hand in hand. And so the once struggling rancher and the widow who vanished found a reason to believe again together. In a whirlwind of auctions, hidden wagons, and daring confrontations, Carter McAllister and Ava Colburn discovered that hope is never truly lost, not when courage and compassion guide the way. High Haven Range stands as proof that with a brave heart and a steadfast spirit, even the fiercest storms can be weathered and the wildest stallions can be tamed. If you enjoyed this story of redemption and second chances, please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you want more heartfelt tales. Share this video with friends who love gripping Western dramas and unexpected twists. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that prove hope can shine brightest in the darkest moments. Thank you for watching and believing in the power of love and resilience.